Hello and welcome. This is David Stinnett, just doing a quick update on my project Spots after the most recent push to the GitHub. Since the last update, we've got some changes to the code, but I want to do a quick demonstration on the user end of what that looks like. So we have a very similar setup to last time. We have our profile on top, and then our cards underneath. However, our modals now have a little bit of functionality. We can update the name, and that actually makes changes to the DOM that end up being viewable to the user. We also can make new posts by inputting an image link. Something else to note is we also have form validation implemented. So if the post or if the text is too short, then we cannot submit the form. Button gets grayed out to show that it cannot be pressed. And that also works over here. Even if it is long enough, this one has to be a URL because it's expecting an image link. We also have functional like buttons and delete buttons. And when you click on the images, an image modal pops up to give you a better look. That works even for widescreen formatted images. Next, we will look at our code. All right, so the first thing I want to go over in the code is the change from using hard-coded cards in our HTML to this card template. We use that in our get card element function here. So we bind everything together. First, we clone the card template. That makes sure that we have all of our HTML elements that we're going to be using set up in our JavaScript. We're then able to bind the card title and the card image. We use that information here to set the card data. The image element, it needs a source, it needs alt text, and then we need the text content for the title that's going to be displayed with the image. We also set up the like button here, as well as the delete button. The like button just works by toggling a CSS class for an active state or an inactive state. The inactive state is the default. And then the delete button, we just call remove on the card element, and that just gets rid of it from the DOM. And then we also add our click event listener to open the preview modal, which is the large image view. And at the end, we just return the card element. This get card element function is called here. And so we just on page load, we have a for each that goes over our initial cards, which is our array up here. And then appends each card, or makes a card for each element in the array, and then appends it to the card list, which is the name of our unordered list in our HTML. All right, next we'll go over the code for our forms. So we will start with find. This is our profile edit button. Most important thing for what we're talking about now is our open modal, edit profile modal. So that opens our modal for editing our profile. And then this is where we set what happens when we submit the form. So our profile name element and profile description element, They are set, like the text content for those is set by our inputs, both edit profile, name input, edit profile description input, and then upon submit, we close the modal. We also have a listener for our new post button that opens our new post modal. And similar to the other submit, we just set input values into an object. So the name, new post caption input, set that as the value. The link is the new post image link. And then those input values get passed into our get card element function, and we use prepend for the card element so that it gets added to the top of the list, which ends up with a showing. Yeah, we can add our image again. Caption of dog, and it gets added to the top of the list. And the last thing I want to talk about is the form validation. So that is all the code for that is hosted in this validation.js file. The validation is set up on page load by the enable validation. Before I go over that, I do want to note that all of our classes and selectors for this are held in the settings object that gets passed into enable validation with the settings parameter. Also important to note that in the rest of our logic here, we have that labeled as config. We could have had it be settings here instead of config, but it made more sense to me to have the logic be a little separate just to make it clear that this parameter and this object are somewhat separate from the logic here, but you could also, it doesn't matter either way. So enable validation, we declare form list using the config .form selector. So the form selector is our modal form class. So it's just useful because now if we did want to make changes to our classes, we can make it the change here rather than having to go through all of these functions where we use this same selector and make that change. So it just keeps everything unified. So then we iterate over the form list. And for each element, we call the set event listeners, which that is defined here. Inside of here, we have our toggle button state, and we also have our check input validity. We do that for each input. So what this is doing is we make sure that the button is toggled before, and then after we check validity, we also call the button toggle function. So since that comes first, we'll go up to our toggle button state function. So if the button has invalid inputs, we disable the button, which makes sense. We check that here. Otherwise, we enable the button. So we have our disable button here, enable button. We do that just by adding a class that changes the CSS for the button, and then we also disable it. If we enable the button, we remove the class so the CSS goes back to the default, and we set disable to false, so that enables the button. Down here in our set event listeners, we also have check input validity. That is up here. Basically, it's just an if-else. If the input element is not valid, we show an error. Otherwise, we hide the error. By the error we use is just the default error that's going to be we get from the browser. and that code is set up here. So feel free to comment if you have any questions on how I've built this out, or if any of my explanation of the code isn't 100% clear. Thanks for watching.